Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Harris.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane. Division 1, Shelley Sourceable.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
Dwayne Chisholm.
Here.
Attorney Jim Markman. Mr. Markman?
I'm here, Holly. Sorry, I was muted.
Thank you. And Holly Hughes present.
Thank you. Item 4, public comments and period open to the public. If anyone wishes to address the board on any item that is not on the agenda, please feel free to do so now. Hearing none. Item 5, adoption of agenda. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Also move, Mr. President. Director Lane.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George.
This is Director Miller. I'll second.
Thank you, Audrey. Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Robert Harris.
Yes.
George Lane.
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable.
Yes.
Frank Donato.
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes, the measure passes. Thank you. Item 6, consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's consent calendar?
Mr. President, I would ask that 7A1, 7A2, 7A3, that they would be taken off the consent calendar. We really have no question at this time, but just because of the ongoing magnitude, I think we deserve just a little discussion.
That's a good point, George, but could I ask you to address that when we get to item 7? Right now, we're just on item 6, consent calendar.
Okay. Excuse me.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar. This is Director Sourceable.
Thank you.
This is Director Donato. I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Division 5, Robert Harris.
Yes.
Division 4, George Lane.
Yes.
Division 1, Shelley Sourceable.
Yes.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Yes.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Yes, the measure passes. And now we'll move along to item 7A, High Desert Water Bank and Water Bank Resources Committee Report. This will be by Frank Donato, but let's address Director Lane's earlier comments. What would you like to?
So are we looking? Okay, so basically on 7A1, we want to remove that at this time from the for discussion.
Is that the request, Director Lane?
Yes.
What are staff's comments?
Well, this is Dwayne Chisholm. We do have a staff report prepared for each of the items in 7 to present to the board, and we can certainly answer any questions that may occur through the process of that staff report, either before or after, as whatever the pleasure of the board is.
All right, this is Director Donato. I think we should go through the presentation because we've asked all the consultants. Are the consultants on the line too?
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Yeah, and we don't have to take action. If George wants us to put it off at another meeting, that's fine. But I think since we have everybody here, let's hear what they have to say.
Well, and the one item, that 7A1, that is for a little over $2,221,000. It's my understanding, I'm not sure how it's listed, but it's almost a change order or it's an amendment to the existing contract, and maybe that's well done, maybe not, but I think the board should. I think we need to talk about it.
I agree.
Well, Director Lane, would you have any objection if we listen to the staff's presentation?
No, not at all. That's what it should be.
Okay.
Oh, good, okay.
Okay, good evening. This is Matt. I'm going to cover items 7A1 through 7A4 this evening. In the room here at the office, we also have Joe Long, who's the design lead for Stantec on the High Desert Water Bank. On the phone, we also have Paul Chow with Kennedy Jenks, who's our program management lead. And we have Tim Leo with Montgomery and Associates, who is the hydrogeology team lead on this project. So we've got a few presentations. I'll jump right into it. The first one being item 7A1, consideration and possible action on amendment number 2 of Stantec's professional services agreement, number C2009, for additional engineering, design, and hydrogeology services associated with the High Desert Water Bank. You see a lot of twos there. It's the amount is $2,212,222.56. So I thought before we jump in,
What was the original contract amount?
the original contract amount is roughly $3.5 million. So what you see on the screen there, before we get into the details of the amendment, I thought it'd be good.
And again, we're going to listen to everything that's being said, but has any of this, how much of this work has been done?
How much of the amendment work has been done?
No, the $3.5 million.
Joe, what would you say percentage-wise of the...
Percentage-wise, we've fulfilled probably 90% of that contract.
It's pretty late to be coming in and wanting a over $2 million change order amendment. You call it an amendment, whatever you want, but it sounds like a change order to me.
So we can, you'll see as we get into the presentation that this was work that was planned early on, that it was going to be brought back to the board as the project progressed. So we've got a slide to cover that. So the first slide that you see there is just a little background to remind everybody of our agreement with Metropolitan Water District. AVAC and Metropolitan entered into the agreement for the High Desert Water Bank program back in late 2019. In that agreement, Metropolitan agreed to pay all capital costs associated with the construction of the High Desert Water Bank. At that time, it was estimated to be roughly $131 million. Just a sub-bullet there, there's no financial impact to existing AVAC customers and ratepayers for this project. Once all the facilities are constructed, AVAC will own those facilities. As part of the agreement, Metropolitan will have the ability or the right to store and recover up to 70,000 acre-feet per year and store a total amount of 280,000 acre-feet in the groundwater basin. Big plus to the valley and the groundwater basin is they're only able to recover 90% of what they bring into the valley. So therefore, 10% of the stored water is left behind in the basin. Metropolitan will pay for all operation, maintenance, replacement, and management costs associated with operating the bank. Metropolitan, on top of that, will pay AVAC $100 per acre foot of water that is returned to Metropolitan Water District. And that's tied to the CPI, and so it'll escalate annually based on the CPI. As part of that recovery fee, Metropolitan has agreed to pay AVAC a minimum of $2 million per year, also CPI escalated annually, and that $2 million goes towards the recovery fee. Any questions on the background and our current high-level agreement with Metropolitan? All right. So we'll jump right into amendment number 2 with Stantec being proposed this evening. As the High Desert Water Bank project progresses and construction packages are awarded, AVAC requires support from Stantec's engineering, design, and hydrogeology team for tasks supporting the construction packages. So these tasks were not originally included in Stantec. And construction began. So this amendment number 2 includes primarily 4 tasks. The first one is some oversight on the well drilling activities. That's going to be performed by Montgomery and Associates as a sub-consultant to Stantec. There's also some additional analysis and data collection required during the well drilling and testing activity. Also, as you know, we recently awarded the contract for construction of the new turnout and turn-in facilities for this project. So this amendment includes Stantec's time and effort associated with what we call engineering services during construction. So that was envisioned all along as being part of this contract. And then the last bullet there, you'll hear a little bit more about in the second agenda item. But there is a small change associated with the gravity-fed recharge facilities, which could net total construction savings for the project. And we'll get into more of the details of that. So Stantec provided an amendment proposal for these services, which staff and Kennedy Jenks, acting as our program lead, have reviewed and found to be acceptable. As mentioned earlier, the total fee for the amendment is a little over $2.2 million. And you can see the sub-bullets there that break down the various tasks that we reviewed on the previous slide. So as you can see, most of it, roughly $1.8 million, is associated with the well drilling oversight and hydrogeology work, as well as data collection that's going to be used for our groundwater model. The engineering services during construction for the turnout project is roughly $175,000. The recharge based on redesign is roughly $85,000. And the turnout bid support and project management is roughly $137,000. Now this slide shows, based on the overall project budget, that project budget does include what we call soft cost budget. So within the soft cost budget, we have design costs, well drilling oversight, engineering services during construction, construction management, and program management. The dark blue bars coincide with the total budget amount for each of those tasks. So for instance, under design, you can see we had an original budget of a little over $7 million. The light blue bars shows what's currently contracted with Stantec and Kennedy Jenks for their services. And that includes not only what's been authorized, but what's also included in amendment number 2 being presented this evening. So you can see under design, even with this amendment, there's roughly $2.5 million left for future design work associated with the High Desert Water Bank. Then you can move down and see, because construction is just getting started, we haven't awarded and committed to too much cost associated with the engineering services during construction or construction management. But those blue bars associated with those tasks will increase as those projects get let for construction. Any questions on this slide?
I have a lot of comments, but you don't have a $3.5 million contract and do an amendment for a little over $2.2 million dollars. That's ridiculous, and we've known for years that's a vulnerable place for public agencies is in amendments or change orders. this amounts to something that should be a new bid process, but, and I know maybe this work needs to be done, but if it would have been identified much earlier, I'm sure I think we would have got a lot better price, but at this point, it should go out for a bid. And this is not a minor, it's not 50,000, not 100,000. And if we're this wrong, somebody's at fault. And again, as far as who's reviewing this and making sure it's right, I don't know if the board or the committee, but we need to look at the hours, we need to look at the rate, and we should probably look at competitive bids. But this is not right, and I'm not going to support it.
And Matt, could we go back one slide, please?
Yes.
Maybe we ought to review these individual items. Is there a reason that these were not brought to us earlier? Was it planned to bring this amendment to us at this stage in the process?
Yes. It was, this whole program was planned at the time when we first went out to bid for selection of the design firm for the high-des water bank. It was decided by the team in AVAC that there were too many unknowns at that point in time for what level of effort would be required for the overall design of the project. So we wanted to approach it in a phased approach. So we defined the level of effort we knew at the time to get started on the design work, and we awarded the contract to Stantec based on that. All along, we knew at some point we would be having amendments to cover additional services as the project design evolved. And we knew more about what the project was going to look like and what facilities are going to be required, so that we weren't throwing a large design number at something we didn't know.
That should have been known before, or at least closer than what it is right now. And again, you can have change orders of a few $100,000, but well over, what is it, approaching over 60% of the original amount. That's not acceptable. And no matter who's paying for it, if AVAC, Metropolitan Water Agency, that's not the proper way to treat taxpayers' funds, and it should be put out to bid again.
Mr. President, this is Rob.
You don't leave that much unknown.
Mr. President, this is Rob May.
Yes, Rob.
Yeah, thank you very much. Has the committee reviewed all this, and are they in support of this?
Yes, the committee reviewed this last week. And as you can see on the slide, the committee and staff are recommending the board award of amendment number 2 to Stantec's professional service agreement.
Okay, Mr. President, I move approval of board order 7A1.
I'll second. This is Director Sorsable. I'll second.
Thank you very much. We have made note of those motions in the second, but we will still continue some discussion. Again, Matt, can you go back to that slide? Yes, this one. I gather from what you're telling us, Matt, that all of these expenses had been envisioned from the very beginning of the process, but now is the proper time to bring them to us. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. With the exception of the recharge basin redesign of $84,426, that one we can chalk up to a change that we'd like to make to the design. So that was not envisioned early on. With the
as I understand it, that redesign is actually something that we hadn't anticipated, but it could save us many millions of dollars in the overall project, correct?
Correct. In the neighborhood of $15 to $20 million in capital costs. And we'll get into that on the next agenda item.
We can justify it. It sounds like it's trying to be done, but regardless, things like this, that should be a new bid, and you don't go out and do a $2.2 million based upon some negotiation. This is a major change, and we've done bids for projects considerably smaller than this. We look for bids, and we failed to do that, and that would be a mistake if the board okays this without going through a bid process. Fine, but bid it.
Yeah.
Don't do it on a $2.2 million amendment.
So the attorney Markman can back me up on this, but this is professional services work, which is not required to go public bid.
Mr. President, this is Rob.
Yes, Rob.
Yes, that was my next comment. I see that Mr. Markman's here. Could he comment on this, please?
Certainly.
Yes, this is design work and oversight work. This is not construction work. So the board is not required by the public contract code or any other code to competitively bid this kind of work. It's professional services as distinguished from work that's biddable, that's required to be bid because it's a public project, which means construction. So the board's on a course that is valid legally.
Thank you, Jim.
Did we originally bid this project?
We originally sent out an RFP, request for proposals for design firms.
Mr. Markham, you may have given professional advice, but you gave no practical advice. I mean, my God, that's crazy. What you're required to do by law and what you should do in a business purposes is maybe it appears that it's two different things. I don't think anybody envisioned professional services an amendment of $2.2 million.
Now, Matt, maybe this would be...
Or if it was lobbied.
Matt, maybe this would be a good time to discuss the review that we did give for these numbers. Since they weren't out to bid, we had to have some way of understanding how reasonable they were and how they give the public best value for the dollar. Can you address that?
Yes, thank you. That's a good comment. So in your board packet on page 44 is staff report, and attached to the staff report is the detailed scope of work and fee schedule associated with this amendment. So Kennedy Jenks was hired by AVAC to act as program management on behalf of AVAC for the overall High Desert Water Bank development. And so staff and KJ worked closely in reviewing the proposal submitted by Stantec. We spent months going back and forth different iterations of the proposal. We also have a hydrogeologist team that's a subconsultant to KJ that understands what level of work is needed for well drilling oversight of this magnitude. And they provided a lot of detail to trim the cost down of this amendment. Joe Long is here this evening from Stantec, and he can testify that we went back and forth and we did trim significant amount off of this original amendment.
Well, in this case, why have any bids? If the staff looks over it, the engineer looks over it, and everything seems fine, why go out to bid? That would save a lot of money and time by not doing it. What's different about a professional services agreement where they do specific tasks? This is not an attorney. We have some unknown things. These are specific tasks. If it's good for one, it should be good for the other, but it's not good for either one.
This Director Donato, I'd like to make a comment. I think, Matt, you need to go back and explain. When this project started, we looked at the possibility of doing it in-house. As a project manager, we felt we weren't qualified. So we looked at the different firms. Didn't we interview several firms before the board picked the project manager to help make sure that the bids and the cost were in check so he wouldn't overpay for the bids?
Yeah, our KJ.
I think what's happening here. George I don't think was around when we did this, and I think you need to explain. Let's start with KJ. Why is KJ here, and why is KJ? How's it benefit AVAC?
Yeah, that's good. Good comment, Director Donato. So early on, when we were in negotiation with Metropolitan on this program, we realized early on that limited staff that we have, we needed outside expertise to help us through this process. So AVAC did engage with Kennedy Jenks, and then we brought them on early on to act as an agent on behalf of AVAC, side by side with staff, almost like an extension of staff.
You know, Matt, I don't disagree with very much of what you're saying, other than this is a major change, and it should be subject to a new bid. In to come up with this large of an amendment, something that was not well planned, and so maybe everybody's looking at this. Maybe it's not, but it needs to be a new bid, and I can pretty much see it's not going to happen. But again, it's not going to have my support.
So KJ was brought on board to help us through the process of selecting the design firm. We put out an RFP. We had interest from maybe 5 engineering firms. We went through in detail their hourly rates, their proposed scope of work, and KJ worked with staff and the board on selecting Stantec. So that's how Stantec was brought on board. As I mentioned, kind of to answer Director Lane's question, we envisioned all along that this would be piecemeal design work.
Yeah.
So we knew going into it, and so did the design team, that we would only award a contract for a limited scope associated with the early phases of design. And that we would be bringing back to the board, as we are now, amendments. I don't view it as change order. It's a planned amendment to compensate them for the additional design work that's needed.
Is there anything that what you're saying in the minutes or anything to verify what you're saying, Matt?
Yeah, we can go back and look at what we presented.
We look for major change orders, and I call them change order. You call them amendment.
Yeah.
But from up to $2.2 million plus amendment.
Yeah.
And it looks like this might just be the start right there. If it works in one, it's going to work for another one.
And this kind of is a graphic to kind of explain what I'm talking about. So we could have, back from day one, awarded a design contract for $7 million plus. But we didn't think that was a prudent thing to do because there were too many unknowns of the project at that time. We wanted to be more cost conscious of what we were awarding for design work as the project developed. So you can see on this graph, we envisioned over $7 million of design work plus another roughly $3 million of well drilling oversight. So that's roughly $10 million that we did not award early on. We chose to phase it in.
That's a good explanation, Matt.
Mr.
Are there any more
President?
questions or discussion?
Yeah, Mr. President, this is Rob. I call for the question.
Well, could we have a motion and a second? Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Well, we already made the motion. I made the motion. Shelley seconded to approve.
Yes, I'm sorry. We already have a motion and a second. Now, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Abstained.
Division 6, Audrey Miller.
Yes.
Division 5, Robert Paris.
Yes.
Division 4, George Lane.
No.
Division 1, Shelley Sourceable.
Yes.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Yes.
Division 2, Keith Dias.
Yes. The measure passes with 5 yeses, a no, and an abstention. Thank you very much. Next item.
Well, Matt, keep on going.
All right. So thank you, Director Donato. So next item is item 7A2, consideration and possible action on approval to advertise competitive construction bids for a high desert water bank recharge and pipeline package. In your board report or staff board packet, I should say, there is a staff report on page 64. So a little bit of background. You probably recall at the last board meeting, staff recommended that we pull an item that was on the consent calendar to approve putting out to bid for construction bids, the recharge basins and recharge pipelines. And the reason for that is since that time, staff and the consultants have identified a staged approach to the recharge basin design that has a potential to reduce capital costs while still meeting the recharge goals of the project. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Long, who's with Stantec, and he's going to walk through these slides to show and explain to the board why we came up with this proposed change.
Good evening, directors. This is Joe Long, Stantec, Senior Principal. So we went back and looked at how we could optimize some of the recharging efforts that were being put into the site and also make some construction changes to implementing how we put the project out to bid. So the first thing we wanted to do is to right-size what we call the recharging facilities in an optimization, and we would develop develop and construct stage 1 recharge area, develop and construct stage 2 recharge areas, develop and construct the stage 1 and stage 2 delivery water systems. At that point in time, once those construction packages are complete, we would check the performance of the groundwater recharge through action, basically take measurements out there to see how well it's performing, and then make an evaluation based on the operational data that we're seeing out in the field, if the recharge objectives can be achieved. And then from there, we would expand into an area which I call the stage 2-1B. We'll get into this in a couple of minutes on some mapping. And then if necessary, we would expand the water delivery system to accommodate the expanded recharge based on overall performance. So what this really comes down to is that we're able to defer portions of the project to a future date or possibly forever. That would defer about $15 to $20 million in overall savings. So going through some of the things that I was talking about before, the stage 1, stage 2, stage 2A, and stage 2B, this is a map. So in the areas that are highlighted as olive green, those are the stage 1 and stage 2 areas of the project site. So those are going to go into construction right away. The stage 2A and the stage 2, basically the brown areas, will also be incorporated into that design package, and then ultimately will be put out into a construction bid. The area that we're calling stage 2B has been deferred for several reasons, and we'll get into those specifically. But ultimately, what the overall project build out would have given us 759 acres of recharge areas that we could use for recharging recharging waters into the groundwater table. Next slide. So in deferring this, what we're calling the stage 2B area, it's about 196 acres. The stage 2B area is also a system that requires pumping because the elevation of the recharge basins is actually above the aqueduct. So therefore we could not gravity feed. And that would require a pumping station and then also a regulating basin. And then about an additional 11,400 linear feet. So going back into this, what the facilities that are going to be deferred are the most expensive portions of the project. That would basically defer the stage 2B recharge areas, which again is 196 acres. It also defers the 2B water delivery pump station, which is 5 200 horsepower pumps and appurtenances that will run that pumping facility. The pump station regulating reservoir, which was another expensive item that needed to be looked at. Stage 2B water delivery pipelines. Matt, would you mind pointing for me?
Or you want the mouse?
There we go. That gives us the ability to defer this portion of the pipeline system and the delivery system in there until we know that whether we need it or not. That also, not shown on the map here, is it eliminates 5 turn-in structures into the basins, and then also the interbasin spillways. And ultimately what this does is save the project about 400,000 cubic yards of earthwork on the overall project. All of those costs add up to about 15 to 20 million in deferred costs. That's the range that we're anticipating. What leaves us next is what we're calling the stage 1, 2, and 2A areas. As I had said earlier, the stage 1 and stage 2 areas will be constructed as the next package that will go out. We're calling that the recharge package. And then the highlighted blue lines here will be the delivery system that comes into play. And what that does is ultimately gives us 563 acres of recharge available to us. And it allows us to evaluate what's going to happen in the field once we start putting water into the ground. Any questions? So with the reduction of the areas, the full build-out project is 876 acres, give us about 79,000 acre feet of groundwater infiltration capacity. And then the reduced or the staged implementation design gives us 563, which gets about 55,000 to 75,000 acre feet in the 9-month period. What this chart below actually shows is what is the ability of this area to deliver water out for infiltrating. And based on the blue line down here, that's assuming that we can get about 1/3 of a foot a day of infiltration over the site. And for a 12-month period, we can get just shy of 70,000 acre feet. If we make an assumption that we can get 1/2 foot a day of recharge over the entire site that we're on the reduced areas, we can get in excess of 70,000 acre feet, which then exceeds our cap on an annual basis based on the environmental. So somewhere in between these two lines is the actual infiltration rate of the entire site. So basically it appears that if we still could meet our project goals based on the reduced overall, reduced acreage of the recharge areas. Any questions on that? So currently we are finishing up the 100% design, which also includes a rework of the design package to put out the reduced package itself. And we're expected to be finished with that in mid-March and ready for advertising and competitive bids shortly after.
So with that, thank you, Joe. As mentioned, this item was pulled from the last board meeting until we gave this presentation. As Joe mentioned, we're going to have the design wrapped up mid-March. So we're seeking approval by the board or authorization for staff to place the recharge basin and pipeline project out to bid upon final receipt of the plans and specifications. And that is supported by staff and the High Desert Water Bank Committee.
Do we have a motion for Board Order 7A2?
This is Director Donato. I'll move on 7A2 that we approve the board order and go forward with the High Desert budget.
Mr. President, this is Rob. I second the motion.
Second by Rob. Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Abstain.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Harris,
Yes.
George Lane,
Abstain.
Shelley Sorsable,
Shelley?
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Keith Dias.
Yes. Let's see. Did you tally that up, Holly? We had,
Yes. 5 yes and 2 abstentions.
thank you. Measure passes. Next item.
Okay, go ahead. This is board order 7A3. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Director Donato. So this is our last action item for the High Desert Water Bank Committee. It's consideration and possible action on what's called method of service study agreement with Southern California Edison for the High Desert Water Bank. So a little bit of background. As you can imagine, there's going to be a number of wells out this project. So we need to work closely with Edison on how we're going to bring sufficient power to the site and power all of the new wells. So in order to do that, Edison requires what's called a method of service study. The study will analyze the technical requirements to connect to Edison's existing system and also determine the estimate of the cost to do so. Edison requires a deposit of $150,000 associated with the method of service study. AVAC is required to reimburse Edison for all costs associated with conducting the study, and they will work off of that $150,000 deposit that AVAC makes to the Edison. Edison provided a study agreement outlining the analysis and the deposit and reimbursement requirements. Our legal counsel, Jim Markman, has reviewed the method of service study agreement with Edison and found it to be acceptable to the agency. So with that, staff and the committee are recommending that the board authorize agency staff to execute the method of service study agreement with Southern California Edison for the High Desert Water Bank and deposit the $150,000 with Edison. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Matt, this is Frank. Did they say roughly the time schedule when that would be installed, the power there?
They haven't got to that point where we're talking schedule on installing the facilities. Mm-hmm. What the study agreement does, it kicks off the process with the engineering group within Edison to determine what upgrades to their system are needed for the High Desert Water Bank. So it's still going to be, a couple years out, year and a half out, possibly, before we actually start constructing Edison facilities. But we should know what those requirements are within the next 6 months.
So basically, in this $150,000 will be reimbursed by Met as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah, it's part of what we consider capital cost, so it'll be reimbursed by Metropolitan Water District.
Okay. I'll move on board order 783 that we spend the money or send the money to Department. What is this? Edison's for the $150,000 deposit to get the High Desert Water Bank project started.
Director Lyon, I'll second the motion.
This is Director Miller. I have a question.
Yes.
In the method of service study, do they look at other alternate forms of power creation, like solar fields or wind power?
No, they don't. This simply looks at what it's going to take to connect to their existing infrastructure and switch gears that they have in the area.
By traditional means, right?
Correct. Yes, that's
okay. Right. Okay, thank you.
It may actually be any source.
Yeah.
So Edison, whatever Edison is using for a power source, power generation, that would basically be brought into the site. This is actually to deliver the power to the site.
Correct. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sure. This is Dwayne Chisholm, General Manager, and Metropolitan Water District. Let me get my glasses on here so I can see. Informed us that their internal affairs or external affairs, I should say, team was very interested in taking photographs of the construction facilities once they begin to get underway. Metropolitan puts out a monthly newsletter, and oftentimes they highlight projects that they are working on for their customers, retail customers, folks. So that's one of the items. The next item has to do with a international symposium, and what that will be held April 11th through the 15th, and in Long Beach, and a conference that they're going to have there. Montgomery and Associates would like to make a presentation on this particular project, and as such, we ask Metropolitan Water District that they were agreeable to having the project and their name being used. You can see the attached email provides that authorization to use that. To use our name and the Metropolitan name in presenting this project to the International Symposium. So that will occur on April 11th through the 15th. And then finally, we met with Metropolitan Water District, and we talked about quite a few things. We were trying to get Metropolitan's initial feedback with regards to the recent cost estimates, and they're certainly understanding where this project is. It's very similar. They have a similar predicament in most of their other projects that they're working on, so this was not new news to them. They're still very well behind on the project. We talked about the SCE update, which the board recently approved moving forward with that. And then, interesting enough, Metropolitan has an interest in equipping the 4 pilot recovery wells that were recently completed and using some temporary pipe to be able to utilize some water that they previously stored with the agency to be able to utilize during the later part of this year. And they've indicated to us that they would put together an agreement between Metropolitan and Avek that would compensate us for any costs that are associated with that pilot project to moving water back during this drought period.
Dwayne, may I make a comment on that last bullet?
Sure.
As I see it, if we are able to equip these recovery wells early, and if there is capacity for both Met to use them early and for AVEC to use them early, that could be very useful to us in getting water from our groundwater storage into the aqueduct for use in our Quartz-Air water treatment plant if this drought continues. So I fully support that request by Met. Thank you.
You bet. So that concludes this particular item. And that was just for information only.
Yeah, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move along to item 8, General Manager's Report. Thank you. All right, we're moving some things around here. So this is the General Manager's Report for March 8th, 2022. What a difference a couple of months will make. We're looking at the Northern California forecast. You can see we have precipitation is very anemic for the next 10 days, only 0.4 inches. And you can see normally we would get close to 2 inches of supply here. Snow levels are at pretty high levels, between 45 and 7,000 feet. And here's the map that shows the good and the bad of this water year. You can see here we were very high in October. We were about half of what we did in November, and obviously December was very wet. And then we fall off the chart, and January and February, those 2 months is the driest 2 months on record. And I'm sure we're on pace to be at a very, very low level for March, given the long-term outlook for precipitation. So
we're looking pretty dismal for increasing, and there may be some reasons to DWR to actually decrease the allocation by some amount. So because of these very weak situations, and I'll have more to talk to you about that in the future slides here. We did. This is the future slide here. We got from DWR communication to all state water contractors. It came on the 2nd of March. The letter was dated. We got it a couple of days ago, and as I mentioned, you can see that January and February were the driest in over the 100 years of recorded precipitation in the area. They conducted their third snow study, and you can see in December, or at the end of December, we were at 154% of average. Now we're at 63% of average. And what's very disturbing, and this is what's happened the last several years, is that the snow that has fallen has not made it to the lake for storage. It's been absorbed into the soil where it's fallen, and we haven't had the kind of runoff that we've had before in the past. I will note that close to 85% of the watershed has been burnt over the last several years through some of these wildfires. And I think there's a direct correlation between that and the amount of runoff that we're receiving. And then they did their first airborne snow survey flight, and they can see that there really isn't a very good snowpack in our watershed area. And this is the one part of the letter, and this is just some excerpts. If conditions do not approve, a likely reduction in Northern California water supply contracts may limit available water transfer. So DWR is urging collective, proactive, and conservation measures. So they're going to be struggling to meet their reservoir level requirements and their cold water releases that are going to be necessary for the various fish populations and the environmental regulations that govern how water is used coming out of both Shasta and out of Lake Oroville and getting across the Delta.
When they say available for transfers, is that just our contracted amount?
It's what they do during these periods of time. DWR will actually go out to various farming operations in Northern California and try and transfer, make a deal to transfer water from where they have excess water supplies, or will follow a particular field to get additional water supplies. But because of the allocations, there's not going to be as much transfer water, so it's not going to be able to add a lot because sometimes you can add quite a bit of water, a couple 100,000 acre feet through that process. So here's our conditions of the reservoirs. You can see throughout the state. In April, May, June, you're going to see drafting of these reservoirs coming down. You can see right here we're 46% of the total capacity of Lake Oroville, and we have 72% of our historical. And this is normally where we would be. And here's where San Luis Reservoir is. This is particularly disturbing because we're only 44% of total capacity, 53% of average, and this is most of the water that we'll be using this year. And you can see we got about a little short of 900,000 acre feet of water supply in that area. Not all of that can be used. There's a dead pool, and there's quite a bit of water that is used for carryover and backup water that the agricultural communities utilize for their use during the peak summer growing seasons. Here's the maps. They basically show the same thing. You can see we started off really good. We thought we were going to have a, above banner year like one of these up here, or at least an average year. And then in January, things just fell off, and you can see we're very flat in through March. So we're probably looking closer at a very dry year, moving ourselves forward. Same thing that we have here with the San Luis Reservoir. And as I mentioned to you, here we are in San Luis. We're even lower than where we were in some of these drier periods. San Luis is in, we weren't able to get as much water across the delta as we would have liked to. For things that we can control, here we are. We're serving between 8 to 10 million gallons a day out of our treatment plants. And as far as our geopurification treatment recovery from the West Side Water Bank, you can see we're about 12 million gallons a day coming from that supply source. As far as the water banking, the only water banking we're doing is we're putting in between 3 and 4 acre feet a day into the East Side Water Bank, and that's water's almost immediately taken out. So it's just to balance what we take out versus what we're putting in. This is a new graph for you. Gives you an indication. We're going to be watching this very closely. And this graph here shows you what the requests were. These are the requests of our customers, what they actually requested, the amounts. This blue line here shows you actually what happened with the 2021 deliveries. So this is what we actually delivered to them, even though they requested more. This is what they actually were able to use. And then this here is the actual deliveries for this year. So you can see in January and February, they're even a little less than what they've requested. So that's a good sign as far as meeting all of our customer needs in the future. We'll just see how this plays out and how much water supply that we'll have. As far as water quality, we're finalizing our annual water quality report to get that out to our customers for inclusion in their water quality letters that they must submit by June. There's a new ELAP, which is the regulatory agency that certifies all of our laboratories, and they got a new program for compliance, and we've met with them and are meeting all their new requirements for sampling and compliance. Our monthly compliance sampling will be accomplished tomorrow, and then we've had some pretty consistent finished water coming out of the plant, even though there's been a little bit of variance in the water quality coming in. As far as our operation maintenance, we're currently pulling about 50% of our capacity out of the West Side Water Bank. We resumed putting some water back into Lake Palmdale at 1.5 million gallons a day. And as we talked about, the recharge rate on the East Side Water Bank's about 3 acre feet a day. And we want to make sure that we balance our recovery rate. We did have a HVAC project upgrade where we received some bids, and those were open today. We also have our winter treatment plant and feeder maintenance projects, the ones that we do traditionally throughout the system, and we're wrapping those up and getting ready for the increase in demand as the weather warms up. And we are, just so you know, we are experiencing considerable amount of lead time in getting any kind of parts or materials. As far as events and schedules, there's a public hearing for redistricting tomorrow night. The AV Water Master Board's on 3/23/22 at 10 a.m. I am scheduling a vacation. There's two 3-week periods in the year where we have 3 weeks in between board meetings, and I've scheduled a 2-week vacation, the first 2-week vacation that I've had in almost 10 years working here. And so we're looking to do that between March 28th and April 8th. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Chisholm? Thank you very much, Dwayne. I hope you enjoy your 2 weeks off.
Thank you.
Item 9, directors' reports. Anything to report from our directors or attorney?
I have nothing, Keith.
Thank you, Jim. Item 10, request for future agenda items. Any requests? Hearing none, we'll move along to item 11. Dwayne, is there a reason to go into closed session tonight?
Yes, we have items C and D.
Do I have a motion to go into closed session for items 11C and 11D?
Mr. Director Miller, I so move.
Thank you.
Director Sourceable, I second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Gary Van Dam,
Yes.
Audrey Miller,
Yes.
Robert Paris,
Yes.
George Lane,
Yes.
Shelley Sourceable,
Yes.
Frank Donato,
Yes.
Hank Dias.
Yes, the measure passes. We'll be moving into closed session as soon as Holly can make that transition.
Give me a couple minutes. Thank you.